And I crawled back in bed and I want to scream, Granny said, tossing the chopped celery into the big silver pot. I hate feeling helpless. I blame myself for not being able to find them. After all, there's more magic in books in this house than 10,000 fairy tales combined, and yet I'm no closer to bringing them home today than I was 6 months ago. Sometimes I look around this town and wonder if the person responsible for all of our heartache is sitting next to me in the coffee shop, she continued. Or maybe it's the lady behind me in line at the supermarket, or the woman who styles my hair at the beauty parlor. Maybe it's the nice man at the filling station who pumps gas into the car. Maybe it's the paperboy, or the mailman, or that girl who sells cookies for the scouts. Sabrina's heart began to rise. Granny Rhoda felt exactly the way she did. Why hadn't she told them her true feelings about the town? It would have kept Sabrina from feeling so guilty and confused about the place. You're looking at the wrong people, she said, feeling encouraged by the old woman's revelation. You should be looking at the ever-afters. Labeling ever-afters are people, Granny said, setting down her knife. They have families and homes and dreams. And murders, plots, kidnapping schemes, and plans to destroy the town. You don't really believe they are all bad, do you? What about Snow White and the sheriff? They're ever-afters. We just haven't discovered what they're really up to yet. Sabrina, Granny Rhoda shouted. No grandchild of mine is going to be a bigot. Hatred can grow a child into something terrible and beyond your control. You're defending the ever-afters? They took my parents away and you're defending them? Sabrina cried. She jumped off the stool. Yes, I'm going to defend them and anyone else who people choose to discriminate against. How can you do it? Sabrina screamed on the verge of tears. Because that is what I choose to do, the old woman said. Yes, there are bad people among the ever-afters, but there are bad people among us all. You can't blame the all for the actions of one. I know it is difficult when you don't know who is responsible, but the guilt cannot be everyone's. Sabrina felt as if she were being suffocated. The kitchen suddenly seemed so small, as though there wasn't room for the both of them anymore. You can look at it any way you want, she said, taking a step backward. But if they aren't all in on it, then they sure aren't stepping up to help. And every time you smile at one of them or shake one of their hands, you're just making it that much easier for them to stab you in the back. Sabrina, Granny said, you have to get a hold of your anger. If you cannot learn to control your hatred will control you. I'll get a hold of my anger when my mom and dad are safe at home, the girl cried. Sabrina spun around and rushed out of the room, up the stairs and into her bedroom. She slammed the door and ran to her bed. Burying her head under the pillows, she broke into violent sobs. In 2 weeks it will be Christmas, the second Christmas since one of the ever-afters, had kidnapped her parents. Why didn't anyone care about bringing them home? Why was she the only one who saw what was really going on in Ferryport Landing? Sabrina awoke to a knocking on her bedroom door. She looked over at the clock on the nightstand and realized it was already 7 o'clock at night. She had been asleep for more than 3 hours. Still in her robe and socks, she crawled out of the bed and crossed the room to open the door. Mr. Kenneth was waiting on the other side. The family awaits you in the car, he said. I don't feel like going anywhere, she responded. The thought of seeing Granny Rhoda and Daphne right now made her sick to her stomach. Child, this is not an invitation, Mr. Kenneth said. There's work to be done. Get dressed now and meet us at the car. Where are we going? Mr. Kenneth took a deep breath before he answered. The answer to that question will not change the fact that you are going there. We are waiting in the car. I'll be down in a minute, Sabrina said. She closed the door and got dressed, but her fresh clothes didn't do anything to hide the horrible odor coming off of her. She had slept through a bath time, and now she smelled like a slimy, bottom-feeding fish. She hurried through the empty house, put on her coat and hat, and opened the front door. Granny was waiting outside with her key ring in her hand. Feeling better? She asked. Sabrina nodded. Thankfully, the old woman wasn't going to keep harping on their conversation. Good. A nap can do wonders for a person. Hurry along. Everyone's in the car. Daphne, Elvis, and Puck were in the back seat, looking warm and well-fed. The little girl and the dog both stared out the window when Sabrina got inside. Apparently, her little sister was back to giving Sabrina the silent treatment, and this time Elvis was joining her. Puck, on the other hand, looked at her and laughed. "You are in so much trouble," he chuckled, sounding impressed. "Where are we going?" she asked. "The sheriff needs our help," Granny replied. They cruised through the country roads, heading toward the elementary school. Mr. Kenneth pulled into the parking lot. Sheriff Hampstead's car was parked nearby. When everyone piled out, the old man once again climbed onto the top of the car and sat in his meditative posture. Elvis whined when he realized he was being left behind again. "Buddy, you can come in with us, but there's a criminal stealing blankets out of the back seats of cars," Daphne warned. "He might snatch yours while we're inside." The big dog bit down hard on the edge of his blanket and eyed the window suspiciously as the family went into the school. They rushed to the principal's office, where they found the sheriff sitting in a chair taking notes while Mr. Hamlin paced back and forth. "Rhoda, what are you doing here?" the principal asked. "The sheriff asked us to come by," she explained. "The Grimms are pretty good at finding people," Hampstead said awkwardly. It was obvious to Sabrina he was trying to be discreet about the family being deputized. "We're happy to help," Granny Rhoda said. "No offense, Rhoda, but my kid is freezing out in the cold somewhere. I don't need an old woman and 2 kids. I need the police department," Hamlin said. "I've got the best tracking dog in the world in the car," Granny said. "I'd take Elvis over 100 police officers any day. We'll find your boy." The principal sat down in his chair and rolled it over to the icy window. "It's so cold out there," he whispered. "By God, was chasing Wendell this afternoon," Granny said. "I heard all about it," the man responded, without turning away from the window. "Then you know he's involved with the deaths." Hamlin spun around in his seat angrily and pointed his finger at the old woman. "He didn't do it," he shouted. "I know that, Piper. In fact, I think he's been trying to stop what's going on in this school." "He's so curious. One afternoon, we watched an old black and white detective movie on TV together, and he was hooked. Now everything's a mystery. I should have known he'd get himself in trouble. He also seems to have picked his father's flair for music. I hear he's using a harmonica to control animals." "Rhoda, he's a good kid," Hamlin said. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door, and Mr. Sheepshank entered. "Oh, hello, everyone. So sorry to interrupt," he said, pointing to the wristwatch on his freckled arm. "Mr. Hamlin, it's time." "Counselor, my son is missing," the principal shouted angrily. Sabrina turned to look at the rosy-cheeked man, who smiled nervously. "Of course, we can talk later," he said. He closed the door and was gone. Daphne took a silver star out of her pocket and pinned it to her chest so that everyone could see her badge. "Mr. Hamlin, we don't want you to worry. We'll find your son and bring him back to you." Granny Rhoda smiled at the little girl. "Why are you so eager to help me?" Hamlin asked. "That's our job," Daphne said, "to protect and serve." The little girl reached down, yanked on her belt, and pulled her pants up. Sabrina almost burst out laughing, but quickly stopped herself when Sheriff Hampstead's angry face told her he recognized the little girl's impression. "I know you've had a history with my family, Piper, but I'd like to think we're never too far along to start over," Granny said, extending her hand. Hannah stared at it for a moment and shook it firmly. "All we need is his locker number." The principal punched the key on his desktop computer and the screen lit up. He typed in a few strokes and smiled. "He's number 323. That's right around the corner, near the boiler room door," he said. "What should I do? Can I go with you?" "Wait here," the sheriff said as he stood up from his chair. "We'll call you as soon as we know anything." Hampton and the family walked out of the office and down the hall until they found 323, right where the principal had told them it would be. "Do you have some kind of magic that opens locks?" Sabrina asked as she eyed the combination lock on the door. Granny opened her handbag and pulled out a hammer. I wouldn't call it magic exactly, she said, handing the hammer to Puck. The boy grinned and raised the hammer high over his head. He brought it down hard on the log and it snapped in two. Can I do another? He asked, but the old woman snatched the hammer out of his hand and placed it back into her handbag. Then she tossed the broken pieces of the log to the floor and opened the locker. Inside was a winter coat Wendell had left behind. Granny pulled it out and tossed it and tucked it under her arm. I really appreciate this, the sheriff said. Don't think twice about it, the old woman said. Back in the parking lot, the grooms and Puck found Mr. Canis still meditating on the roof of the jalopy. We're heading into the forest, Granny said, opening the back door and letting Elvis out. Why don't you stay here in case Wendell wanders back to the school? Are you sure you won't be needing me? The old man said. We've got this one handled, Granny Rhoda said. Can I ask you a question, Mr. Canis? Daphne asked. Of course, little one. What do you think about when you're sitting on top of the car? Mr. Canis thought for a moment and looked up at the moon, now high over the nearby forest. I concentrate on all the people I hurt when I was unable to control myself. And that helps you stay calm? Sabrina asked. No, child. It helps remind me of my guilt, he replied. Sabrina didn't know a lot of fairy tale stories. Her dad used to say fairy tales were pointless. When other kids were reading about the Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast, her father was discussing the news with his daughters or reading them the Sunday comics using different voices for the characters. Sabrina and Daphne had done their fairy tale reading on the sly or at school. Still, everyone knew the story of Little Red Riding Hood. As Sabrina looked at Mr. Canis, a terrible realization ran through her. This man sitting on the car roof, who slept across the hall from them at night, had killed an old woman once upon a time. Only, it wasn't a story, it had really happened. He tried to eat a child, too. How could Granny let him live in the house? No wonder her dad had forbidden even a copy of Mother Goose from entering their home. He was trying to protect them from the truth. Granny was busy holding Wendell's coat under Elvis's nose. The giant dog took a deep lungful and was soon trotting across the school lawn, sniffing madly in the grass. Looks like he's got the scent, Lieblings, Granny said. Let's go find our Wendell. Chapter 8. Elvis's big feet crunched on the hard ground. The night had grown bitterly cold, and every once in a while Sabrina spotted a snowflake floating toward the ground. She was freezing, even in her heavy coat. If Wendell was still alive out in the woods without his, it would be a miracle. Elvis sniffed the air. Once the big dog caught a scent, he never lost it. When he reached the edge of the trees, he stopped and barked impatiently at the family. It was obvious they were slowing him down. Oh, I wish I could bottle his energy, Granny Rhoda said, taking Sabrina's arm in order to help herself across the school's icy lawn. I'd be a rich old lady. When they finally reached Elvis, he led them into the woods. He sniffed wildly, rushing back and forth along a path. I can't continue this, and we're almost out of time anyways, so I'll just end this video anyways. Goodbye!